I want to talk to you about a bit of a tricky situation today, and I'm hopefully going to do so in a way that means that you can sort of learn from this and hopefully avoid it. My photography business failed. Not the current one. We're all going good at the moment. We're swimming. We're even making it through Brexit and a pandemic, which is very good. I'm very grateful. I couldn't be more grateful that things are sort of ticking along nicely. However, it's not always been this way. There have been some very dark times. There have been some colossal ups. However, let me go back through how my career sort of progressed and talk to you about how it went wrong and why it was never going to work in certain ways. When I started photography, I was a pretentious hipster with a film camera, and I wanted to be a documentary photographer, like Henri Cartier-Bresson, maybe a war correspondent. You know, I had illusions of grandeur, delusions of grandeur. It was never going to work for me. A few reasons why. Firstly, I wasn't very good at it. Secondly, I live in Leicester. And thirdly, nobody really wanted to pay for it. And yes, there is money to be made in this sort of thing, but my friends who work in press, God, they work their asses off for very little money relative to the commercial world. And that's fine. If that's what makes you truly happy, go for it. But for me personally, there were several factors as to why my current business is better for me. And this is all very personal. After trying this for a while, I went, I'm not getting anywhere. There is no one who's going to book me here. I didn't really have the gumption or the guts to move to London or to leave the country at the time. I'd left the country a few times before that to work abroad, and it kind of ended on a sour note, so it sort of put me off a little bit. However, I moved on and I became a music photographer. It seemed to be the next logical step. I went on tour with bands. I knew quite a few bands. I went to big festivals, sort of shot all that sort of stuff backstage. It was very cool. It was very rock and roll. It was very good for my mid-20s. There was a lot of partying going on. I partied a lot. I think I probably shortened my life considerably. Then I started doing the press kits, the promo shots, the album covers, the posters, and it was okay. But money was a bit tight because you have festival season, you have all the albums coming out at very specific times of year, and then lots of nothingness in between. And small bands don't have much money. Big bands paying you are few and far between, because there's a few very big names in the industry and everyone wants them to shoot it because it's kind of a status thing, like I got so-and-so to shoot my album cover. It's cool. I was not cool. It didn't work for me. So there was a few reasons why this didn't work. One was because I was in the wrong location. Another was because it was the wrong niche for me. I'm just really not good at posing people. Have a look at my portfolio work. It's okay, but like the effort that goes into getting it to okay, disproportionate. And finally, there just wasn't enough money around for me. There wasn't that money in the city I live in, and getting into London, I just didn't have the X factor in that particular niche to be able to push myself into that world. If I'd have moved to London, I'd been broke and homeless pretty quick. I then progressed on to doing headshots. I was like, I'll get a studio, we can bring professionals in, we'll shoot them on 6x7 film, it'll be cool. And Leicester doesn't want cool. Leicester wants your standard headshot on a white background. So then I went over to do that, and then I realised that £200 a pop, there's just not enough people needing headshots regularly enough for that to be a sustainable business. And eventually I met my current girlfriend, we were just friends at the time, and I shot her book cover. And she was like, why on earth are you working with people? You clearly find it very stressful and anxiety inducing. And I went, I do, it's horrible. I'm not very good at this. And she worked in food, and I had a very good history of food. My mum was a chef, my dad was a fisherman, sort of weird upbringing to be on a council estate knowing what goose barnacles were. But I digress. So I went into the food world, and suddenly I found my niche. Now, I still had the same problems. One was that local restaurants and cafes wouldn't pay me very much, and the other one being that I live in Leicester, not in London. And sadly, if you want to be good and big at something, you need to move to a capital city. It's just a fact of life, kind of. So what did I do? I got an agent in London. That was the next best thing. I wasn't prepared to move to London, but I did want to have that London-centric world going on. So I got my London agent, and I started shooting in London, in my Leicester studio for London agencies, and in Paris, Brussels, where else have we been? We've been all over, Sicily, places like that. And that's what worked for me, because all of a sudden it was the right niche. And I don't just say I'm a food photographer, that's what I say in sort of layman terms, but I have a very specific type of food photography that I do with a very specific application. So there are very specific people who know they need me, they know me, I'm very niche down, so it's really easy for them to go, this is the person we need, which brings my value far higher up than a few hundred, we're now several thousand, and it just works better this way. So what's the point of my ramblings and amblings? Well, first of all, just because you can take a nice pretty picture doesn't mean it's a profession. Taking pretty pictures doesn't get you paid. Head out to Pinterest or Pinterest, that's like Instagram and Pinterest. Instagram and Pinterest. Have a look at the food photos. There's millions of beautiful photos. No one cares. No one cares about your pretty pictures. I don't care about your pretty pictures. I barely care about my own pretty pictures. So You have to find that next thing which actually makes you a viable business, and pretty pictures in 2020, not enough. You then have to make sure you're in the right location. Living in a tiny village somewhere going, I'm going to be a commercial food photographer, or I'm going to be the next Annie Leibovitz with a Rolling Stone sort of thing, that's not going to happen. You need to move or commute regularly and be in the right bars and cafes. Not now, because we're in a lockdown in the UK again. So brace yourself for a few more videos, because I have very little to do during the next month. And the final thing is you have to find something that has value. Band shoots have value to a certain amount, but they're never going to be huge value compared to the Nike commercial, Adidas, or Adidas, however you pronounce it, the Sony television, whatever it may be. There's brands that are bigger than a single group of musicians. If I'd lived in London, perhaps I'd have gone down that music route, and perhaps I'd have made a success of it. Lots of people do. It's not so that these are not viable career options. If I lived in New York and I was shooting 6x7 film for headshots, I bet I'd be booked up. But it's all about having all the sort of stars align and everything come together nicely. Now, if you're finding yourself in this predicament where you can't quite make the jump and one of these things is ringing out to you, let me know in the comments below, and maybe I'll be able to do a video going deeper down into it to try and solve those problems for you. And hopefully we can all have fun lives, live in studios, and have cats roaming around. See you all next time. Bye-bye.